हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। तो आज की वीडियो में हम देखने वाले हैं एनसीईआरटी क्लास 11 का पॉलिटी, जिसमें आज हम देखेंगे चैप्टर 3 इक्वलिटी। तो शुरू करते हैं हमारा आज का चैप्टर। दिस चैप्टर इज अबाउट द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ इक्वलिटी, ए वैल्यू दैट इज ऑल्सो enshrined in our constitution. In reflecting on this concept, it examines the following question: what is equality? Why should we be concerned about this moral and political ideal? Does the pursuit of equality involve treating everyone the same way in every condition? How may we pursue equality and minimize inequality in different spheres of life? How do we distinguish between different dimensions of equality: political, economic, and social? In the course of understanding and answering these questions, you would encounter some important ideologies of our time: socialism, Marxism, liberalism, and feminism. In this chapter, you will see facts and figures about the conditions of inequality. These are only for you to appreciate the nature of inequality. The facts and figures need not be memorized. Why does equality matter? Equality is a powerful moral and political ideal that has inspired and guided human society for many centuries. It is implicit in all faiths and religions, which proclaim all human beings to be the creation of God. As a political ideal, the concept of equality invokes the idea that all human beings have an equal worth regardless of their color, gender, race, or nationality. It maintains that human beings deserve equal consideration and respect because of their common humanity. It is this notion of a shared humanity that lies behind, for instance, the notions of universal human rights or crime against humanity. In the modern period, the equality of all human beings has been used as a rallying slogan in the struggles against states and social institutions which uphold inequalities of rank, wealth, status, or privilege among people. In the 18th century, the French revolutionaries used the slogan "Liberty, Equality, and Fraternity" to revolt against the landed feudal aristocracy and the monarchy. The demand for equality was also raised during anti-colonial liberation struggles in Asia and Africa during the 20th century. It continues to be raised by struggling groups such as women or Dalits who feel marginalized in our society. Today, equality is a widely accepted ideal which is embodied in the constitutions and laws of many countries. Yet, it is inequality rather than equality which is most visible around us in the world as well as within our own society. In our country, we can see slums existing side by side with luxury housing, schools with world-class facilities and air-conditioned classrooms, along with schools which may lack even drinking water facilities or toilets, waste of food as well as starvation. There are glaring differences between that the law promises and what we see around us. Read the accompanying fact sheet on global inequalities and the table on inequalities within our country. Fact sheet on global inequality. The richest 50 individuals in the world have a combined income greater than that of the poorest 40 crore people. The poorest 40% of the world's population received only 5% of global income, while the richest 10% of the world's population controls 54% of global income. The first world of the advanced industrial countries, mainly in North America and Western Europe, with 25% of the world's population, owns 86% of the world's industry and consumes 80% of the world's energy. On a per capita basis, a resident of the advanced industrial countries consumes at least 3 times as much water, 10 times as much energy, 13 times as much iron and steel, and 14 times as much paper as someone living in a developing country like India or China. The risk of dying from pregnancy-related causes is 1 to 18 in Nigeria, but 1 to 8,700 in Canada. The industrial countries of the first world account for nearly 2/3 of the global emissions of carbon dioxide from the combustion of fossil fuels. They also account for 3/4 of emissions of sulfur and nitrogen oxide that cause acid rain. Many industries known for their high rate of pollution are being shifted from the developed countries to the less developed countries. Here are some findings from the Census of India held in 2011 about household amenities and assets. You don't need to memorize any of these figures. Just read these to understand the extent of urban-rural disparities in the country. Where would your own family fit? Families that have rural families, urban families. Electric connection 55%, 93%. Tap water in the house 35%, 71%. Bathroom in the house 45%, 87%. Television 33%, 77%. Scooter or moped or motorcycle 14%, 35%. Car, jeep or van 2%, 10%. Thus, we face a paradox. Almost everyone accepts the ideal of equality, yet almost everywhere we encounter inequality. We live in a complex world of unequal wealth, opportunities, work situation, and power. Should we be concerned about these kinds of inequalities? Are they a permanent and inevitable feature of social life, which reflects the differences of talent and ability of human beings as well as their different contributions towards social progress and prosperity? Or are these inequalities a consequence of our social position and rules? These are questions that have troubled people all over the world for many years. It is a question of this kind that makes equality one of the central themes of social and political theory. A student of political theory has to address a range of questions, such as what does equality imply? Since we are different in many obvious ways, what does it mean to say that we are equal? What are we trying to achieve through this ideal of equality? Are we trying to eliminate all differences of income and status? In other words, what kind of equality are we pursuing and for whom? Some other questions that have been raised regarding the concept of equality, which we will consider here, are to promote equality. Should we always treat all persons in exactly the same way? How should a society decide which differences of treatment or reward are acceptable and which are not? Also, what kind of policies should we pursue to try and make the society more egalitarian? What is equality? Take a look at these images. All of them make distinction between human beings on grounds of race and color, and these appear to most of us as unacceptable. In fact, such distinctions violate our intuitive understanding of equality, which tells us that all human beings should be entitled to the same respect and consideration because of their common humanity. However, treating people with equal respect need not mean always treating them in an identical way. No society treats all its members in exactly the same way under all conditions. The smooth functioning of society requires division of work and functions, and people often enjoy different status and rewards on account of it. At times, these differences of treatment may appear acceptable or even necessary. For instance, we usually do not feel that giving Prime Minister or Army Generals a special official rank and status goes against the notion of equality, providing that privileges are not misused. But some other kinds of inequalities may seem unjust. For instance, if child born in a slum is denied nutritious food or good education through no fault of his or her own, it may appear unfair to us. The question that arises is which distinctions and differences are acceptable and which are not. When people are treated differently just because they are born in a particular religion or race or caste or gender, we regard it as an unacceptable form of inequality. But human beings may pursue different ambitions and goals, and no and not all may be equally successful. So long as they are able to develop the best in themselves, we would not feel that equality has been undermined. Some may become good musicians, while others may not be equally outstanding. Some become famous scientists, while others more noted for their hard work and conscientiousness. The commitment to the ideal of equality does not imply the elimination of all forms of differences. It merely suggests that the treatment we receive and the opportunities we enjoy must not be predetermined by birth or social circumstances. Equality of opportunities. The concept of equality implies that all people as human beings are entitled to the same rights and opportunities to develop their skills and talents and to pursue their goals and ambitions. This means that in a society, people may differ with regard to their choice and preferences. They may also have different talents and skills, which result in some being more successful in their chosen career than others. But just because only some become ace cricketers or successful lawyers, it does not follow that the society should be considered unequal. In other words, it is not the lack of equality or status or wealth or privilege that is significant, but the inequalities in people's access to such basic goods as education, healthcare, safe housing that make for an unequal and unjust society. Natural and social inequalities. A distinction has sometimes been made in political theory between natural inequalities and socially produced inequalities. Natural inequalities are those that emerge between people as a result of their different capabilities and talents. These kinds of inequalities are different from socially produced inequalities which emerge as a consequence of inequalities of opportunity or the exploitation of some groups in a society by others. Natural inequalities are considered to be the result of different characteristics and abilities with which people are born. It is generally assumed that natural differences cannot be altered. Social inequalities, on the other hand, are those created by society. Certain societies may, for instance, value those who perform intellectual work over those who do manual work and reward them differently. They may treat differently people of different race or color or gender or caste. Differences of this kind reflect the values of a society, and some of these may certainly appear to us to be unjust. This distinction is sometimes useful in helping us distinguish between acceptable and unfair inequalities in society, but it is not always clear or self-evident. For instance, when certain inequalities in the treatment of people have existed over a long period of time, they may appear to us as justifiable because they are based on natural inequalities, that is, characteristics that people are born with and cannot easily change. For example, women were for long described as the weaker sex, considered timid and of lesser intelligence than men, needing special protection. Therefore, it was felt that denying women equal rights could be justified. Black people in Africa were considered by their colonial masters to be of lesser intelligence, childlike, and better at manual work, sports, and music. This belief was used to justify institutions like slavery. All these assessments are now questioned. They are now seen as distinctions made by society as a result of the difference of power between people and nations rather than based on their inborn characteristics. Another problem which arises with the idea of natural differences is that some differences which could not be considered natural need no longer be seen as unalterable. For instance, advances in medical science and technologies have helped many disabled people to function effectively in society. Today, computers can help blind people, wheelchairs and artificial limbs can help in cases of physical disability. Even a person's looks can be changed with cosmetic surgery. The famous physician Stephen Hawking can hardly move or speak, but he has made major contributions to science. It would seem unjust to most people today that disabled people are denied necessary help to overcome the effects of their disability or a fair reward for their work on the grounds that they are naturally less capable. Given all this complexity, it would be difficult to use the natural, socially produced distinction as a standard by which the laws and policies of a society can be assessed. For this reason, many theorists today differentiate between inequality arising from our choices and inequalities operating on account of the family or circumstance in which a person is born. It is the latter that is a source of concern and to advocates of equality and which they wish to minimize and eliminate. 3 dimensions of equality. After considering what kind of social differences are unacceptable, we need to ask what are the different dimensions of equality that we may pursue or seek to achieve in society. While identifying different kinds of inequalities that exist in society, various thinkers and ideologies have highlighted 3 main dimensions of equality, namely political, social, and economic. It is only by addressing each of these 3 different dimensions of equality can we move towards a more just and equal society. Political equality. In democratic societies, political equality would normally include granting equal citizenship to all the members of the state. As you will read in the chapter of citizenship, equal citizenship brings with it certain basic rights such as the right to vote, freedom of expression, movement and association, and freedom of belief. These are rights which are considered necessary to enable citizens to develop themselves and participate in the affairs of the state. But they are legal rights guaranteed by the Constitution and laws. We know that considerable inequality can exist even in countries which grant equal rights to all citizens. These inequalities are often the result of differences in the resources and opportunities which are available to the citizens in social and economic spheres. For this reason, a demand is often made for equal opportunities or for a level playing field. But we should remember that although political and legal equality by itself may not be sufficient to build a just and egalitarian society, it is certainly an important component of it. Social equality. Political equality or equality before the law is an important first step in the pursuit of equality, but it often needs to be supplemented by equality of opportunities. While the former is necessary to remove any legal hurdles which might exclude people from a voice in government and deny them access to available social goods, the pursuit of equality requires that people belonging to different groups and communities also have a fair and equal chance to compete for those goods and opportunities. For this, it is necessary to minimize the effects of social and economic inequalities and guarantee certain minimum conditions of life to all the members of the society. Adequate health care, the opportunity for good education, adequate nourishment, and a minimum wage. Among other things, in the absence of such facilities, it is exceedingly difficult for all the members of the society to compete on equal terms. Where equality of opportunity does not exist, a huge pool of potential talent tends to be wasted in society. In India, a special problem regarding equal opportunities comes not just from lack of facilities, but from some of the customs which may prevail in different parts of the country or among different groups. Women, for instance, may not enjoy equal rights of inheritance in some groups, or may be social prohibitions regarding their taking part in certain kinds of activities, or they may even be discouraged from obtaining higher education. The state has a significant role in such matters. It should make policies to prevent discrimination or harassment of women in public places or employment, to provide incentives to open up education or certain professions to women, and other such measures. But social groups and individuals also have a role to play in raising awareness and supporting those who want to exercise their rights. Economic equality. At the simplest level, we would say that economic inequality exists in society if there are significant differences in wealth, property, or income between individuals or classes. One way of measuring the degree of economic inequality in a society would be to measure the relative difference between the richest and poorest groups. Another way could be to estimate the number of people who live below the poverty line. Of course, absolute equality of wealth or income has probably never existed in a society. Most democracies today try to make equal opportunities available to people in the belief that this would at least give those who have talent and determination the chance to improve their condition. With equal opportunities, inequalities may continue to exist between individuals, but there is possibility of improving one's position in society with sufficient effort. Inequalities which are entrenched, that is, which remain relatively untouched over generations, are more dangerous for a society. If in a society certain classes of people have enjoyed considerable wealth and the power which goes with it over generation, the society would become divided between those classes and others who have remained poor over generations. Over time, such class differences can give rise to resentment and violence. Because of the power of the wealthy class, it might prove difficult to reform such a society to make it more open and egalitarian. Feminism. Feminism is a political doctrine of equal rights for women and men. Feminists are those men and women who believe that many of the inequalities we see in society between men and women are neither natural nor necessary and can be altered so that both women and men can lead free and equal lives. According to feminists, inequality between men and women in society is the result of patriarchy. This term refers to a social, economic, and cultural system that values men more than women and gives men power over women. Patriarchy is based on the assumption that men and women are different by nature and that this difference justifies their unequal positions in society. Feminists questions this way of thinking by making a distinction between sex, that means biological difference between men and women, and gender, which determines the different roles that men and women play in society. For instance, the biological fact that only women can become pregnant and bear children does not require that only women should look after children after they are born. Feminists show us that much of the inequality between men and women is produced by society and not by nature. Patriarchy produces a division of labor by which women are supposed to be responsible for private and domestic matters, while men are responsible for work in public domain. Feminists question this distinction by pointing out that, in fact, most women are also active in public domain. That is, most women all over the world are employed in some form of work outside the home. But women continue to be solely responsible for housework as well. However, despite this double burden, as feminists term it, women are given little or no say in decisions taken in the public domain. Feminists contend that this public or private distinction and all forms of gender inequalities can and should be eliminated. Marxism and liberalism are two important political ideologies of our time. Marx was an important 19th century thinker who argued that the root cause of entrenched inequality was private ownership of important economic resources such as oil or land or forest, as well as other forms of property. He pointed out that such private ownership did not only make the class of owners wealthy, it also gave them political power. Such power enables them to influence state policies and laws, and this could prove a threat to democratic government. Marxists and socialists feel that economic inequality provides support to other forms of social inequality, such as differences of rank or privilege. Therefore, to tackle inequality in society, we need to go beyond providing equal opportunities and try and ensure public control over essential resources and forms of property. Such views may be debatable, but they have raised important issues which need to be addressed. An opposing point of view can be found in liberal theories. Liberals uphold the principle of competition as the most efficient and fair way of distributing resources and rewards in society. They believe that while states may have to intervene to try and ensure a minimum standard of living and equal opportunities for all, this cannot by itself bring equality and justice to society. Competition between people in free and fair conditions is the most just and efficient way of distributing rewards in a society. For them, as long as competition is open and free, inequalities are unlikely to become entrenched and people will get due reward for their talents and efforts. For liberals, the principle of competition is the most just and efficient way of selecting candidates for jobs or admission to educational institutions. For instance, in our country, many students hope for admission to professional courses and entry is highly competitive. From time to time, the government and the courts have stepped in to regulate educational institutions and the entrance tests to ensure that everybody gets a fair and equal chance to compete. Some may still not get admission, but it is considered to be a fair way of distributing limited seats. Socialism refers to a set of political ideas that emerged as a response to the inequalities present in and reproduced by the industrial capitalist economy. The main concern of socialism is how to minimize existing inequality and distribute resources justly. Although advocates of socialism are not entirely opposed to the market, they favor some kind of government regulation, planning, and control over certain key areas such as education and healthcare. In India, the eminent socialist thinker Ram Manohar Lohia identified 5 kinds of inequalities that need to be fought against simultaneously: inequality between men and women, inequality based on skin color, caste based inequality, colonial rule of some countries over others, and of course, economic inequality. This might appear as self evident idea today. But during Lohia's time, it was in common for the socialists to argue that class inequality was the only form of inequality worth struggling against. Other inequalities did not matter or would end automatically if economic inequality could be ended. Lohia argued that each of these inequalities had independent roots and had to be fought separately and simultaneously. He did not speak of revolution in the singular. For him, struggle against these 5 inequalities constituted 5 revolutions. He added 2 more revolutions to this last: revolution for civil liberties against unjust encroachments on private life, and revolution for non-violence for renunciation of weapons and favor of satyagraha. These were the 7 revolutions of Sapta Kranti, who is for Lohia was the idol of socialism. Unlike socialists, liberals do not believe that political, economic, and social inequalities are necessarily linked. They maintain the inequalities in each of these spheres should be tackled appropriately. Thus, democracy could help to provide political equality, but it might be necessary to also devise different strategies to deal with social differences and economic inequalities. The problem for liberals, not inequality as such, but unjust and entrenched inequalities which prevents individuals from developing their capabilities. How can we promote equality? We have already noted some of the basic differences among the socialists and the liberals on the most desirable way of achieving the goal of equality. While the relative merits and limitations each of these points of view are being debated the world over, we still need to consider what principles and policies might be considered necessary for pursuing equality. Specifically, we need to consider if the use of affirmative action is just for purposes of bringing about equality. This issue has raised a lot of controversy in recent years, and we will discuss this issue in the following section. Establishing formal equality. The first step towards bringing about equality is, of course, ending the formal system of inequality and privileges. Social, economic, and political inequalities all over the world have been protected by customs and legal systems that prohibited some sections of society from enjoying certain kinds of opportunities and rewards. Poor people were not granted the right to vote in a large number of countries. Women were not allowed to take up many professions and activities. The caste system in India prevented people from the lower caste from doing anything except manual labor. In many countries, only people from some families could occupy high positions. Attainment of equality requires that all such restrictions or privileges should be brought to an end. Since many of these systems have the sanction of law, equality requires that the government and the law of the land should stop protecting these systems of inequality. This is what our Constitution does. The Constitution prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. Our Constitution also abolishes the practice of untouchability. Most modern constitutions and democratic governments have formally accepted the principle of equality and incorporated it as identical treatment by law to all citizens without any regard to their caste, race, religion, or gender. Equality through differential treatment. However, as we noted earlier, formal equality or equality before law is necessary but not sufficient to realize the principle of equality. Sometimes it is necessary to treat people differently in order to ensure that they can enjoy equal rights. Certain differences between people may have to be taken into account for this purpose. For instance, disabled people may justifiably demand special ramps in public spaces so that they get an equal chance to enter public buildings. A woman working in call centers at night may need special protection during the journey to and from the center so that their equal right to work may be protected. This would not be seen as infringements of equality but as enhancement of equality. What kinds of differences hinder access to equal opportunities and what kinds of policies may be pursued to overcome those hindrances are questions that are being discussed in almost all societies today. Some countries have used policies of affirmative action to enhance equality of opportunity. In our country, we have relied on the policy of reservations. In the next section, we will attempt to understand the idea of affirmative action and understand some of the issues raised by specific policies within that framework. Affirmative action. affirmative action is based on the idea that it is not sufficient to establish formal equality by law. When we wish to eliminate inequalities that are deeply rooted, it is necessary to take some more positive measures to minimize and eliminate entrenched forms of social inequalities. Most policies of affirmative action are thus designed to correct the cumulative effect of past inequalities. Affirmative action can, however, take many forms, from preferential spending on facilities for disadvantaged communities, such as scholarships and hostels, to special consideration for admission to educational institutions and jobs. In our country, we have adopted a policy of quotas or reserved seats in education and jobs to provide equality of opportunity to deprived groups, and this has been the subject of considerable debate and disagreement. The policy has been defended on the ground that certain groups have been victims of social prejudice and discrimination in the form of exclusion and segregation. These communities who have suffered in the past and been denied equal opportunities cannot be immediately expected to compete with others on equal terms. Therefore, in the interest of creating an egalitarian and just society, they need to be given special protection and help. Special assistance in the form of affirmative action is expected to be temporary or time-bound measure. The assumption is that special consideration will enable these communities to overcome the existing disadvantages and then compete with others on equal terms. Although policies of affirmative action are supported for making the society more equal, many theorists argue against them. They question whether treating people differently can ever lead to greater equality. Critics of positive discrimination, particularly policies of reservations, thus invoke the principle of equality to argue against such policies. They contend that any provision of reservation or quotas for the deprived in administrations for higher education or jobs is unfair, as it arbitrarily denies other sections of society their right to equal treatment. They maintain that reservations are a form of reverse discrimination, and they continue with the practices that the principle of equality questions and rejects. Equality requires that all persons be treated alike, and when we make distinction between individuals on the basis of their caste or color, we are likely to reinforce caste and racial prejudices. For these theorists, the important thing is to do away with social distinctions that divide our society. In the context of this debate, it is relevant to draw distinctions between equality as a guiding principle of state policy and equal rights of individuals. Individuals have a right to equal consideration for admission to education, institution, and public sector employment, but competition should be fair. Sometimes, when competition for limited seats or jobs, people are from deprived strata may be at a disadvantage. The needs and circumstances of first-generation learners whose parents and ancestors were illiterate are very difficult from those who are born in educated families. Members of excluded groups, whether they are Dalits, women, or any category, deserve and need some special help. To provide this, the state must devise social policies which would help to make such people equal and give them a fair chance to compete with others. The fact is that in the spheres of education and healthcare, India has done far less for its deprived population than what is their due. Inequalities in school education are glaring. Many poor children in rural areas or urban slums have little chance of attending schools. If they do get the chance, their schools have little to offer that would be comparable to the facilities available in allied schools. The inequalities with which children enter school tend to continue to hamper their chances to improve their qualification or get good jobs. These students face hurdles in gaining admission to elite professional elite jobs. These students face hurdle in gaining admission to elite professional courses because they lack the means to pay for special coaching. The fees for professional courses also may be prohibitively high. Consequently, they cannot compete on equal terms with the more privileged section. Social and economic inequalities of this kind hinder the pursuit of equal opportunities. Most theories today recognize this. What they contest is not the goal of equal opportunity but the policies that the state should pursue to achieve that goal. Should the state reserve seats for the deprived communities, or should they provide special facilities that can help develop talents and skills from an early age? How should we define who is deprived? Should we use an economic criterion to identify the deprived, or should we use social inequalities arising from the caste system in our country as the basis of identifying the deprived groups? These are aspects of social policy that are today being debated. Ultimately, the policies that we choose would have to be justified in terms of their success in making the society more egalitarian and fair to all. While reflecting on the issue of equality, a distinction must also be made between treating everyone in an identical manner and treating everyone as equal. The latter may on occasions need differential treatment, but in all such cases, the primary consideration is to promote equality. Differential or special treatment may be considered to realize the goal of equality, but it requires justification and careful reflection. Since differential treatment for different communities was part and parcel of the caste system, and practices like apartheid, liberals are usually very of deviations from the norm of identical treatment. Many of these issues relating to the pursuit of equality have been raised by the women's movement. In the 19th century, women struggled for equal rights. They demanded, for instance, the right to vote, the right to receive degrees in colleges and universities, and the right to work. That is, the same rights as the men in their society. However, as they entered the job market, they realized what women required special facilities in order to exercise these rights. For instance, they require some provisions for maternity leave and crèches in the workplaces. Without special consideration of this kind, they could not seriously compete for jobs or enjoy a successful professional and personal life. They needed, in other words, sometimes to be treated differently if they are to enjoy the same rights as men. As we deliberate on issues of equality and examine whether different treatment is warranted in a particular case, we need continuously to ask ourselves whether differential treatment is essential to ensure that a set of people can enjoy the same rights as the rest of society. Caution must, however, be exercised to see that differential treatment does not yield new structures of dominance and oppressions, or become a means for some dominant groups to reassert special privileges and power in society. Differential treatment is intended and justified only as a means to promoting a just and egalitarian society. तो ये है इस चैप्टर का एक्सरसाइज, और इसी के साथ हमारा 3rd नंबर चैप्टर कंप्लीट हो गया है। तो अगर आप चैनल पर नए हैं तो चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर दीजिए और नोटिफिकेशन आइकन पर क्लिक कर दीजिए ताकि आपको सारे वीडियोस के अपडेट्स मिल सके। और अगर आपको वीडियो अच्छा लगे तो लाइक कर दीजिए, साथ ही अपने दोस्तों के साथ शेयर कीजिए ताकि उन्हें भी हेल्प हो सके। तो हमारा आज का ये सेशन यहीं तक था। थैंक यू, थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग।